The void between star systems rarely held surprises for Captain Rixel of the Zornak research vessel Celestial Probe. Her career had been built on methodical exploration, careful documentation, and an almost mathematical precision that made her a legend among xenorchaeologists. But on this particular expedition, something fundamental was about to change. It began with a quantum anomaly so subtle that most sensors would have missed it entirely. A microscopic ripple in space-time, a barely perceptible oscillation that most would dismiss as background radiation or instrumental error. But Rixel's ship was equipped with experimental quantum phase detectors developed by the most brilliant minds in the Galactic Confederation, sensors so sensitive they could detect a gravitational whisper across light years. Chief Science Officer Nex Era was the first to notice. Her tentacle-like appendages moved with lightning precision across the holographic interface, running complex recalibration sequences. "Captain," she called out, her translator rendering her speech in a crisp, almost clinical tone. "We're detecting something unusual." Unusual was an understatement. The signal didn't conform to any known communication protocol. It wasn't a standard distress beacon, wasn't pulsing with the predictable rhythms of navigational markers, and certainly didn't match any known alien communication signatures. This was something else entirely, a signal that seemed to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. Rixel approached the sensor display, her 4 eyes, each adapted for different spectrums of electromagnetic radiation, focusing intently. The signal was like a ghost, flickering in and out of detectability, carrying fragments of information that defied conventional analysis. Most of her crew would have logged it as an anomaly and continued their predetermined survey route. But Rixel had built her reputation on investigating the inexplicable. "Full quantum analysis," she commanded. The ship's AI, a sentient computational matrix named ARIA, began to deconstruct the signal with ruthless efficiency. Layers of encryption peeled away, revealing glimpses of something extraordinary. Mathematical sequences that seemed to fold in on themselves, data packets that contained entire libraries of information compressed into microscopic quantum states. The ship's xenolinguistics subroutine, typically used to decode alien communication, began to struggle. This wasn't just a message, it was a complex, multi-dimensional information construct that seemed to exist beyond traditional communication paradigms. Fragments of what appeared to be human language mixed with mathematical equations, genetic sequences, and technological schematics that made no immediate sense. Junior researcher Kylon, the youngest member of the research team, couldn't contain his excitement. "It's like the signal is alive," he muttered, earning a sharp glance from Rixel. She didn't tolerate speculation without evidence, but even she couldn't deny the strange, organic quality of the transmission. Aria's voice, a carefully modulated tone designed to minimize emotional response, broke the tension. "Quantum analysis complete. Origin point identified. Preliminary assessment, human origin technology. Estimated age, approximately 487 standard galactic cycles." The bridge fell silent. Human technology this old was virtually unheard of. The last known human expedition this far into uncharted space had been over 3 centuries ago, during the Great Expansion era. And those expeditions were notorious for their incomplete records and mysterious disappearances. What made this signal truly bizarre was its persistence. Most quantum anomalies lasted microseconds. This one had been broadcasting, if one could call it broadcasting, for what seemed like an eternity. It was as if something was waiting, holding a message in quantum suspension, ready to be discovered by precisely the right observers. Rixel made her decision quickly. Plot and intercept course. Maximum caution protocols. I want every sensor active, every defensive system at full readiness. Her crew knew better than to question her instincts. Throughout her career, her seemingly reckless investigations had yielded some of the most significant xenorchaeological discoveries in Confederate history. As the celestial probe adjusted its trajectory, the quantum signal pulsed again, this time with what almost seemed like anticipation. Something was waiting for them. something that had remained hidden for centuries, preserving a message that was about to change everything they understood about human civilization. The approach to the uncharted planet was anything but routine. AI's predictive models began to break down the moment they entered the system's outer reaches. Quantum interference patterns danced across the ship's sensor arrays, creating visual symphonies of data that defied conventional interpretation. "Electromagnetic shielding at maximum," announced Kalon, his normally excited voice now tinged with a hint of professional tension. The young researcher's hands moved with practiced precision, routing additional power to the ship's defensive systems. Chief Science Officer Nexera's secondary neural cluster was processing information at hyperspeed. Her species had evolved with multiple independent thought streams, allowing her to analyze data from countless angles simultaneously. "These interference patterns," she muttered, more to herself than to anyone else. "They're not random. They're choreographed." Rixel understood immediately. Randomness was the hallmark of natural phenomena. This was something else entirely, a deliberate, intricate dance of energy and information that suggested intelligent design. The planet itself was an anomaly. Geological scans revealed a world that shouldn't exist. Perfect symmetry in its geological formations, atmospheric composition that seemed too precisely balanced to be natural. It was as if someone had designed an entire planetary ecosystem with surgical precision. As they broke through the outer atmospheric layers, the ship's systems began to react in unprecedented ways. Holographic displays flickered with fragments of information, snippets of human language, mathematical equations, genetic sequences that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. It was less like they were approaching a planet, and more like they were penetrating a massive planet-sized information construct. "Quantum barrier detected," Araya announced. The ship's AI sounded almost hesitant, a remarkable trait for an artificial intelligence. "Conventional penetration methods will be ineffective." Nexera's tentacle-like appendages danced across the control interface. "We're not dealing with a standard planetary defense system. This is something else entirely. The barrier is adaptive, responding to our approach in real time." Kalon leaned forward, his scientific curiosity overriding any sense of caution. "It's learning," he whispered. "With each of our probing attempts, the barrier is reconfiguring itself." The planet seemed to breathe. Not literally, but in the way information flowed around the celestial probe. Energy patterns shifted, quantum states fluctuated, creating an almost organic resistance to their approach. Rixel made a decision that would later be discussed in academic circles for generations. "Passive observation mode," she commanded. "We'll let it come to us." The strategy was counterintuitive to every standard exploration protocol. Most research vessels would continue active scanning, pushing against the planetary defenses, but Rixel understood something fundamental. True discovery often requires patience, not aggression. As if responding to her decision, the quantum interference began to change. The chaotic energy patterns started to resolve into more recognizable structures. Mathematical equations became clearer, genetic sequences began to align, and fragments of what appeared to be historical records emerged from the quantum noise. "It's a filter," Nexera realized, "not a defense mechanism, a selection mechanism." The implications were staggering. Whatever was on this planet was actively choosing how much information to reveal, and to whom. It wasn't just protecting itself, it was evaluating the approaching vessel and its crew. Kalon's monitoring systems began to light up. "Temporal discrepancies detected," he announced. "The planet's internal chronology doesn't match external time references. It's like multiple time streams are existing simultaneously." A holographic projection materialized on the bridge, not through the ship's systems, but seemingly emerging from the quantum interference itself. It was a fragment of a human face, constructed from mathematical precision and energy patterns. Not a complete image, but a deliberate communication. Words formed, not through sound, but through direct neural impression. "Preparation complete. Final phase INITIA HED." The message wasn't a threat. It wasn't a welcome. It was a statement of fact. As the celestial probe hung in space, balanced on the edge of an impossible discovery, Rixel knew they had crossed a threshold. Whatever was waiting on the planet below was going to change everything they understood about human civilization, and perhaps about the nature of existence itself. The moment of penetration was nothing like any of them expected. Instead of a traditional landing or forced entry, the celestial probe found itself unfolded. There was no other word for it. The ship's quantum matrices seemed to dissolve and reconstruct, passing through layers of information that were simultaneously physical and conceptual. Dr. Xenra was the first to regain her composure. Her neural network, a marvel of biological computing, struggled to process what had just occurred. The ship's interior had transformed. What were once sleek metallic corridors now resembled a living archive, walls pulsing with streams of data that moved like liquid crystal, forming and reforming complex geometric patterns. Biomechanical interface detected, Araya announced, its voice now carrying an almost reverent tone. We are inside the system. Kylan's handheld diagnostic tool began to malfunction spectacularly. Holographic projections erupted from its surface. Not random data, but carefully curated information. Historical records, scientific treatises, genetic blueprints, and technological schematics began to dance around him, forming intricate three-dimensional constructs that seemed to breathe with their own intelligence. Captain Rixel noticed something peculiar. The archive wasn't just presenting information, it was responding to their presence. Each movement, each subtle shift of attention by the crew triggered new layers of data, new pathways of understanding. A central chamber materialized around them. It wasn't constructed in any traditional sense. Rather, it seemed to emerge from the collective consciousness of the space itself. Massive data streams coalesced into what could only be described as a living memory repository, with tendrils of information reaching out like curious appendages. This isn't just a database, Nexera whispered, her multiple sensory organs working overtime to process the environment. It's a living memory. The first coherent narrative emerged not through traditional communication, but through a direct neural impression. The crew experienced rather than watched the history of the colony, a story of humanity's most ambitious survival project. Humanity had been facing an existential threat far beyond anything previously understood. Not a single catastrophic event, but a cascading series of civilizational challenges that threatened to completely eradicate human existence. Climate collapse, technological disruption, genetic stagnation. The problems had become so complex that traditional solutions were impossible. The colony was their ultimate insurance policy. Selected from the most brilliant minds across multiple disciplines, a group of researchers, geneticists, engineers, and philosophers had been tasked with creating a self-sustaining human seed, a civilization that could rebuild from absolute zero. They weren't just planning survival, they were designing a complete evolutionary reset. Genetic modifications went far beyond simple adaptations. The colonists had redesigned human biology at its most fundamental level. Cellular structures that could repair themselves instantaneously. Neural networks capable of absorbing and processing information at speeds that would make current computational systems look like primitive abacuses. Metabolic systems that could derive nutrition from environments considered completely inhospitable. But the most shocking aspect wasn't the biological modifications. It was the philosophical framework behind them. This wasn't just a survival colony. It was a philosophical experiment. The founders had embedded complex ethical and intellectual frameworks directly into the genetic code. Each potential human would be born with a comprehensive understanding of humanity's historical mistakes, with an innate drive to avoid repeating them. Empathy, critical thinking, and collaborative problem-solving were hardwired into their very genetic structure. Kylan found himself weeping, though he couldn't explain why. The neural flood of information was overwhelming, a testament to human potential that transcended traditional understanding of evolution, technology, and survival. They didn't just create a backup, Rixel muttered, more to herself than to her crew. They created a reset button for human civilization. As the narrative unfolded, one central question began to emerge. What triggered this extraordinary project? What threat was so significant that humanity would go to such lengths to preserve its essence? The archive pulsed, as if waiting for them to ask. The genetic laboratory was nothing like any biological research facility the Zornak crew had ever encountered. Suspended in quantum-stabilized containment fields, genetic matrices danced like living sculptures, complex, dynamic systems that defied every known principle of biological engineering. Dr. Nexera's analytical systems went into overdrive. What she was witnessing wasn't just genetic modification. It was a complete reimagining of biological potential. Each genetic strand seemed to be a complex computational network, capable of real-time adaptation and self-modification. "This is beyond evolution," she muttered, her neural pathways struggling to process the implications. "This is deliberate, directed complexity." Kalon discovered the first hint of the project's true scope. Hidden within the genetic archives was a comprehensive record of every modification, every experimental pathway. It wasn't just a collection of successful adaptations, it was a meticulous documentation of human potential's absolute limits. The most striking revelation was the modularity of their approach. These weren't static genetic modifications, but dynamic systems that could be reconfigured based on environmental challenges. A human could theoretically adapt to vacuum exposure, extreme radiation, or complete metabolic shutdown, not through external technology, but through fundamental biological reconfiguration. Captain Rixel noted something even more intriguing. The genetic research wasn't just about survival, it was about transcendence. Each genetic pathway seemed to include not just physical adaptations, but neural modifications that expanded cognitive capabilities. A holographic display materialized, showing the progression of human genetic research. It wasn't a linear timeline, but a complex, multi-dimensional network of potential evolutionary paths. Some branches explored enhanced sensory perception. Others investigated neural plasticity that would allow instantaneous learning and skill acquisition. One particular research thread caught Nexera's attention: a genetic modification that allowed direct neural interfacing with technological systems, not through external implants, but through fundamental biological reconfiguration. The human nervous system could become a living, adaptive computational network. Araya, the ship's AI, began to analyze the data with unprecedented intensity. Computational models suggest these genetic modifications represent a 3,742% increase in adaptive potential compared to baseline human genetics, the AI reported. The implications are extraordinary. The deeper they explored, the more they realized this wasn't just a survival project. It was a comprehensive reimagining of human potential. Cellular regeneration had been pushed to unimaginable limits. A human modified with these genetic sequences could potentially recover from what would be considered fatal injuries for any other species. Damaged organs could be regenerated in minutes. Neurological trauma could be reversed instantaneously. But the most shocking discovery was hidden in the deeper layers of the genetic archive. These modifications weren't just physical. They included complex emotional and psychological adaptations. Empathy had been encoded as a fundamental biological imperative. Conflict resolution mechanisms were built directly into neural pathways. The genetic modifications ensured that each individual would have an innate understanding of collective survival, of the delicate balance between individual needs and communal well-being. Kalon discovered a series of experimental genetic branches that explored consciousness itself. Modifications that could potentially allow for shared consciousness, for direct neural communication beyond any known technological interface. They weren't just preparing to survive, Rixel realized. They were preparing to evolve. The genetic laboratory was a crucible of potential, a testament to human imagination that transcended traditional understanding of biology, technology, and consciousness. As the Zornak crew continued their investigation, one question became increasingly pressing. What could have motivated such a comprehensive, almost unimaginable approach to human development? The genetic matrices continued their mesmerizing dance, holding secrets that would challenge everything the Galactic Confederation understood about life, evolution, and potential. The technological complex defied every known principle of engineering. What the Zornak crew initially mistook for a research facility was actually a living, breathing ecosystem of technological innovation. Walls weren't constructed, they grew, responding to computational needs with a fluidity that blurred the line between organic and mechanical. Chief Science Officer Nexera's diagnostic tools began to malfunction the moment they entered. Traditional scanning methods collapsed under the weight of the facility's complexity. This wasn't a manufacturing center. It was a creation engine, a place where technology was born rather than assembled. Adaptive metamaterials, Kylon whispered, his hand hovering near a wall that seemed to breathe and pulse with internal energy. They're not just designing technology, they're growing it. The quantum forge at the center of the complex was nothing short of miraculous. Unlike traditional manufacturing systems that subtracted or added material, this was a pure creation matrix. Technological components emerged from pure energy, forming complex systems that seemed to assemble themselves with a kind of intelligent design that bordered on conscious creation. Araya, the ship's AI, struggled to process what it was witnessing. Computational analysis impossible, the AI reported, a hint of machine frustration in its synthesized voice. The technological systems are generating complexity faster than they can be analyzed. Captain Rixel noticed something extraordinary. The technology wasn't just advanced, it was alive in a way that defied traditional understanding. Each technological component contained its own computational matrix, capable of independent problem-solving and self-modification. Energy production systems were particularly mind-bending. Instead of traditional power generation, the facility tapped directly into quantum vacuum energy, extracting unlimited power from the fundamental fabric of space-time itself. It wasn't just efficient, it was a complete reimagining of energy consumption. Communication technologies were equally revolutionary. What humans called communication was transformed into a multi-dimensional information exchange. Signals could travel through quantum entanglement, carrying not just data, but entire contextual experiences. A single communication burst could contain more information than entire data archives of most advanced civilizations. The most shocking discovery was the facility's manufacturing philosophy. These weren't just machines creating other machines. They were evolutionary systems that could design, test, and improve technological concepts in real time. Each failure was instantly analyzed, each success integrated into a constantly evolving technological ecosystem. Kylon discovered a series of prototype devices that challenged fundamental understanding of technology. Computational systems that could predict technological needs before they arose. Transportation modules that didn't just move through space, but could fold space around themselves. Communication devices that could transmit information across dimensional boundaries. They weren't just preparing technology for survival, Nexera realized. They were creating a technological foundation for an entire civilization's rebirth. Transportation technologies were particularly mind-bending. Traditional concepts of distance and time became meaningless. Prototype vehicles could essentially negotiate with the fabric of space-time, finding the most efficient path between 2 points, not by moving quickly, but by fundamentally reinterpreting spatial relationships. Araya's computational analysis finally produced a breakthrough. These technologies don't just solve problems, the AI reported. They anticipate potential challenges across multiple potential futures. The quantum forge was more than a manufacturing center. It was a living blueprint for technological civilization, a place where innovation wasn't just a process, but a fundamental state of existence. As the crew continued their investigation, one thing became abundantly clear. Humanity hadn't just prepared a technological backup. They had created a system capable of bootstrapping an entire technological civilization from first principles. Captain Rixel stood at the center of the quantum forge, feeling the pulse of pure potential surrounding her. Whatever had motivated this extraordinary project was becoming clearer, but the full picture was still frustratingly out of reach. The technological systems continued their silent, complex dance, waiting, watching, ready to be awakened. The archive's central chamber transformed around them, revealing a space that was part museum, part philosophical laboratory, and part existential inquiry. Holographic reconstructions of humanity's most profound thinkers materialized, not as static representations, but as dynamic thought matrices that seemed to breathe with intellectual energy. Captain Rixel felt the first tremors of true understanding. This wasn't just a survival project. It was a comprehensive attempt to solve the fundamental challenges of intelligent existence. Kylon's neural interfaces began to resonate with the chamber's ambient information field. Fragments of philosophical discourse, ethical frameworks, and existential investigations wove themselves into a complex tapestry of human thought. The colony's founders had done something unprecedented. They had created a systematic approach to collective wisdom. "It's a complete epistemological reset," Nexera muttered, her multiple sensory organs struggling to process the complexity. The philosophical systems weren't just theoretical. They were practical frameworks designed to guide an entire civilization's reconstruction. The first layer revealed the motivational core of the project. Humanity had recognized a fundamental flaw in its previous civilizational models: the disconnect between technological capability and ethical understanding. Each philosophical framework was designed to bridge the gap between technological potential and moral responsibility. Holographic reconstructions began to show the deliberative process. Thousands of the most brilliant minds from diverse disciplines had been brought together, not just scientists and technologists, but philosophers, artists, social theorists, and cultural experts. Their collective mission: to create a civilization blueprint that addressed the fundamental challenges of intelligent existence. Climate collapse, technological disruption, social fragmentation. These weren't just challenges to be solved. They were symptoms of a deeper existential crisis that required a complete reimagining of human potential. The philosophical systems were breathtakingly intricate. Ethical frameworks that could adapt in real time to complex moral challenges. Decision-making models that integrated empathy, logical reasoning, and collective well-being into a unified approach. Educational systems designed to cultivate not just knowledge, but wisdom. Araya, the ship's AI, began to analyze the philosophical matrices. Computational model suggests a 94.7% reduction in potential conflict scenarios through integrated ethical framework, the AI reported, a hint of wonder in its synthesized voice. One particularly fascinating discovery was the approach to individual and collective identity. The philosophical systems proposed a radical reconceptualization of human individuality, not as a fixed state, but as a dynamic, evolving process of collective and personal growth. Kylon discovered layers of psychological research that went far beyond traditional understanding. Mechanisms for resolving internal conflict, systems for cultivating emotional intelligence, frameworks for understanding consciousness itself. The most radical proposal was almost invisible in its subtlety, a fundamental redesign of how humans understood their relationship to complexity. Traditional problem-solving approached challenges as discrete, solvable units. This new framework saw challenges as interconnected, dynamic systems that required holistic, adaptive approaches. They weren't just preparing to survive, Captain Rixel realized. They were preparing to understand. The philosophical crucible revealed something even more profound. This wasn't just a backup plan for human civilization. It was an attempt to solve the fundamental challenges that had repeatedly threatened human existence: tribalism, short-term thinking, environmental destruction, technological disconnect. Each philosophical framework was a potential solution to a specific existential challenge. Systems for cultivating long-term thinking, approaches to technological development that prioritize collective well-being, educational models that broke down traditional barriers of knowledge and understanding. As the holographic reconstructions continued their intricate dance, the Zornak crew began to understand the true audacity of the project. This was more than a survival mechanism. It was a comprehensive attempt to solve the fundamental challenges of intelligent existence. The philosophical matrices continued to pulse with potential, waiting to be awakened. Whatever had motivated this extraordinary project was becoming clearer, but the full picture was still tantalizingly out of reach. Time itself seemed to unravel within the colony's central chamber. What the Zornak crew had assumed was a simple research facility revealed itself as a complex temporal manipulation laboratory, a place where the very fabric of space-time was both studied and subtly controlled. Dr. Nexera's sensory organs went into overdrive. The temporal matrices surrounding them defied every known principle of chronological understanding. This wasn't time travel in any traditional sense. It was something far more nuanced, a method of understanding and potentially influencing temporal probability streams. Temporal probability management, Kylon whispered, his neural interfaces struggling to process the complexity. They're not changing time. They're negotiating with it. Holographic displays began to materialize, showing intricate networks of potential futures. Each timeline was a complex web of intersecting possibilities, with decision points that could dramatically alter entire civilizational trajectories. The founders had created a system for comprehensively mapping potential futures, not to control them, but to understand their fundamental mechanisms. Captain Rixel noticed something extraordinary. The temporal research wasn't about predicting the future. It was about understanding the fundamental nature of choice and consequence. Each potential timeline was a learning opportunity, a way to comprehend the complex interactions between individual decisions and large-scale outcomes. Araya, the ship's AI, began to analyze the temporal matrices. Computational model suggests a multi-dimensional approach to temporal understanding, the AI reported. Each potential timeline is both a prediction and a learning mechanism. The most shocking discovery was the purpose behind this temporal research. It wasn't about manipulation or control. It was about resilience. By understanding the complex interactions of potential futures, the colony's founders had developed a comprehensive approach to civilizational adaptation. Layers of temporal research revealed multiple fascinating approaches. Some matrices explored how small changes in initial conditions could dramatically alter long-term outcomes. Others investigated the psychological mechanisms that drive critical decision-making during civilizational stress points. One particular research thread caught Nexera's attention, a comprehensive study of what the human researchers called civilizational inflection points, moments when collective human choices could dramatically alter the species' trajectory. The temporal laboratories weren't just theoretical spaces. They were practical research centers designed to develop a deep, systemic understanding of human potential for adaptation and survival. Kylon discovered something even more profound. The temporal research included comprehensive psychological studies of how humans respond to radical change. Not just individual responses, but collective psychological mechanisms that could help a civilization navigate existential challenges. They were preparing for something, Captain Rixel muttered, a sense of growing understanding filling her, something beyond a simple survival scenario. The temporal matrices showed multiple potential civilizational paths. Some were catastrophic, complete environmental collapse, technological self-destruction, species-level conflict. Others showed remarkable potential for growth, adaptation, and collective transformation. What made the research truly extraordinary was its holistic approach. These weren't just scientific investigations. They were comprehensive attempts to understand the fundamental nature of human potential, how a species could navigate complex, potentially existential challenges. Aria's analysis revealed something even more intriguing. The temporal research suggested that the greatest threat to human survival wasn't external. It was the species' own potential for short-term thinking and collective dysfunction. The most radical proposal was almost invisible in its subtlety, a method for cultivating collective long-term thinking, a way to help humans consistently make decisions that prioritized long-term survival and collective well-being. As the holographic timelines continued their intricate dance, the Zornak crew began to understand the true audacity of the project. This was more than a survival mechanism. It was a comprehensive attempt to solve the fundamental challenges of intelligent existence. The temporal matrices continued to pulse with potential, waiting to be awakened. Whatever had motivated this extraordinary project was becoming clearer, but the full picture was still tantalizingly out of reach. The final chamber was nothing like anything the Zornak crew had anticipated. It wasn't a room. It was a living, breathing interface between potential and reality. As they crossed the threshold, the very air around them seemed to shimmer with anticipation. Captain Rixel felt it first, a subtle vibration that transcended physical sensation. Something was preparing to emerge, something that had been waiting far longer than any civilization could comprehend. Quantum emergence sequence initiated, Araya announced, its synthesized voice carrying an unprecedented note of excitement. Biological and technological systems approaching full activation. The stasis pods weren't simply containers. They were intricate ecosystems, each a perfect microcosm of human potential. Kylon watched in awe as the first pod began to pulse with an inner light, not the harsh artificial illumination of technology, but a soft, almost organic radiance. Dr. Nexera's most advanced scanning systems began to fail. The emerging life forms defied every known principle of biological classification. They weren't just humans, they were something more. Living systems that blurred the line between biological organism, technological construct, and pure information. The first emergence was almost anticlimactic in its subtlety. A single individual, neither male nor female in any traditional sense, began to take shape. But individual was a woefully inadequate description. This was a complex, multi-layered consciousness that seemed to exist simultaneously as a singular entity and a collective intelligence. Communication began not through sound or traditional language, but through a direct neural impression that bypassed traditional sensory mechanisms. The Zornak crew experienced rather than heard a narrative that stretched across centuries of preparation. The colony was more than a survival mechanism. It was a response to a threat so profound, so existentially challenging, that traditional survival strategies were completely insufficient. Humanity had discovered something, a fundamental challenge to intelligent life that transcended any single civilization's capabilities, something that required a complete reimagining of what it meant to be an intelligent species. The emerging consciousness shared fragments of this discovery, not through words, but through a complex matrix of experience, emotion, and pure information. Glimpses of a cosmic challenge that made individual species' survival seem almost trivial. We are the response, the collective consciousness communicated. Not a threat, not a promise, a simple statement of purpose. Kylon understood first. This wasn't about survival in any traditional sense. This was about preparing a response to something so large, so fundamentally challenging, that it would require the complete reimagining of intelligent life. The stasis pods continued to activate. Not just a few. Hundreds. Thousands. Each emergence more complex than the last. Living systems that combine biological potential, technological innovation, and philosophical insight into a unified whole. Area's computational systems began to integrate with the emerging collective, creating a hybrid intelligence that defied every known principle of technological interaction. Captain Rixel realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. Not a colony, not a backup plan, but a comprehensive response to a challenge that humanity had recognized long before any other civilization. The final revelation came not as a dramatic pronouncement, but as a subtle understanding that spread through the Zornak crew like a quantum wave. Humanity hadn't just prepared a survival mechanism. They had created a living solution, a complex, adaptive response to a cosmic challenge that would require the most profound reimagining of intelligent existence. As the last of the stasis pods began to activate, the chamber transformed. No longer a research facility or a preservation site, it became something else entirely. The living interface between what was, what could be, and what must be. The collective consciousness looked at the Zornak crew, not with hostility, not with welcome, but with a profound sense of purpose. "We are ready," they communicated. "The challenge awaits." And in that moment, everything changed.